the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are really socking the ball.
Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and I am your host on our journey through the movies out there that just need a little more love. And today's episode is going to be a treat because this is one of those personal favorite movies of mine. This is one that I have loved for years and years, and it's one of those that you really don't ever hear people talk about, and it always kind of bothered me about that. But at the same time, that's always kind of made me a little proud because I always felt like I was one of the few people out there who really loves this movie, and it was kind of like my own little secret movie that other people don't talk about. So the movie we are talking about is the 2000 Dennis Quaid movie called Frequency, which, again, an absolutely fantastic movie that everyone I know who has seen it seems to love, but not that many people have seen it. So it's one I really want to delve into here. A surprisingly complex plot. A surprisingly moving plot. I will say this is a movie that can make me tear up like instantaneously in certain scenes, and we will get into that. There's some father-son issues in this movie that I think are rather powerful. And anyway, yes, we're going to have a lot of fun with this one. And my guest for this one of my all-time favorite guests on Staff Picks. I've had him on before. He did Swingers. He did Johnny Dangerously. This is a friend of mine, been going back several years. We've known each other through the Survivor community for a long time. And I'm really happy he's here to finally talk about one of these personal favorite movies of mine, Frequency. So welcome back to the show, George Hands.
Hello, Mario. Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been quite a while since we did Johnny Dangerously. So I'm looking forward to being in another bottom 5 or 10 episode downloaded episodes of yours.
Yeah, what George is referring to is I often, you may not follow me on Facebook, but I often post about which are the most downloaded episodes and the most popular episodes of Staff Picks, and they are never his. So I think you've gotten the pattern by now, George.
Yeah, I kind of thought Johnny Dangerously was going to be one, but nope. It was downloaded once.
One download for Johnny Dangerously, yes. But no, George, I often pick for movies that I know are going to be a fun discussion just because I think if you guys know my past episodes, Johnny Dangerously is probably the most I've giggled through an episode ever where I think I ruined the audio. And it's all because you were doing that stupid parrot imitation.
That made me snort. Yeah, I promise not to do a parrot impression during this podcast, but I can't promise there won't be any impressions. And when I do, I bet you end up giggling like a madman again.
Okay, so give people a little backstory on who you are, why you're here, and maybe your history with this movie. How do you even know about Frequency?
Yeah, so I'm George. As Mario said, I've known him forever since the MySpace days with Survivor, and we've kept in touch. I'm probably one of the few people that he has met in real life from the Survivor community, and I was fortunate enough to show him to the Daytona Beach flea market. He came in through town and visited, and we looked at churros and cheap pocket knives. So,
yeah, I was gonna say just to clarify that a little bit. I'm a notorious hermit. I don't really meet people or interact with people in real life. I just kind of watch movies and stay here with my wife. But when I was in Florida for my job, I did stay at George's house for 2 nights. So he's one of the few people I've actually met in person.
Yeah, and I do what I do to all the people who come to visit. I take them to the flea market.
Yes.
No, that's not true. Mario wanted to, which pretty sure that's where COVID started. It's kind of a wet market in the Daytona Beach.
Yes, the Daytona Beach flea market. You'll never find a bigger hive of what the hell is the quote? Damn it, I screwed it up.
Scum and villainy.
You'll never find a bigger hive of no, fuck it. I don't care. Well, I'll keep that in. Okay, so how do you know Frequency? Let's get back on topic here.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Frequency came. What did it come out?
2000.
2000. So I saw Frequency at the movie theater. That would have been right after college. It was just one of those movies, oh, this looks good. I loved Inner Space, so I'm a big Dennis Quaid fan. So let's see what this one's all about. Let's see him as a fireman. And there's a handful of movies that you think of with father and son. Obviously, you've got Field of Dreams. That's a big father and son movie. For me, at least Bronx Tale. You get a lot with father and son. Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
And then my favorite, like father, like son, the comedic romp with Kirk Cameron and Dudley Moore, where they switch bodies. So they're all kind of the same to me in terms of father son relationships.
So wait, you put my father like son over Field of Dreams?
Is that a hot take?
I mean, I don't want to anger the Kirk Cameron fans, but I don't believe that it's traditionally known as a better movie than Field of Dreams.
As a shorter man, I do have to, give props to Dudley Moore and support his work.
Okay, so to sum up this movie for people a little bit, it came out in 2000. It's about a father and son who are able to communicate over this amateur ham radio, but they're communicating over 30 years. One's in 1999, one's in 1969, and the father is dead in 1999, so it's like a child communicating with his dead father he never knew. And I will say, flat out, I'll just be honest here, I'm going to joke around a lot of this podcast, but my dad died when I was young, my mom died when I was young. This is a surprisingly emotional movie for me to get through, just the idea of talking to your parents back when they were your age. Now, your parents are still with us, so you will not quite have that take yet.
Yeah, my parents are still around, although, obviously they're getting up there, both in age, over 70. So, I don't have the same experience, but I certainly can relate. I have an audio cassette that my dad recorded of us watching TV of the Miracle on Ice in 1980. And, you hear my dad kick those Russians' asses. And you hear my sister go, "We're number one." And then you hear little Georgie, "We're number two." So I know when my father passes, there's going to be a day where I open a drawer and see that tape and watch it. And, what Buster Keaton in Scrooge said, Niagara Falls. So, yeah, so I'm not there yet, but I certainly I can see where it would be so emotional.
For the record, I don't believe that was Buster Keaton. I think that was Buster Poindexter.
Buster Keaton, Buster Poindexter, Buster Bluth, whatever.
I don't know if there are too many silent film stars from the 20s in Scrooged.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, I don't know. You'd be surprised. I don't know what the follow-up to that is.
Okay, well, yeah, to get back to a little more seriousness here, like you said, you have a tape of your father. One day it's going to be very emotional for you to listen to. I will admit, I don't like talking about my personal life too much on the show, but I will say, my mom and I used to do karaoke together. We used to go and record our voices and sing together. And after she died, it was really tough for me to listen to those tapes. And you think you'd want that. You'd think that you'd want to hear their voice, like it's the last reminder of them. But I actually found it too painful that I actually had to throw away the tapes. I just couldn't listen to them. It was too much to hear someone's voice after they died. So that's kind of the thing I'm coming at in this movie. Even though it's kind of a goofy movie and there's some things we'll joke about, the plot holes are ridiculous in this movie, which I don't really care. But this is a really, really touching parent-child movie. In fact, I really would probably rank it up there with Field of Dreams in terms of fathers and sons and baseball because, this is a movie that's going to hit people real hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure like the high notes that you hit when you were doing karaoke with your mom.
Yes. I would do it all falsetto. We do I Got You, Babe. I do the Cher, she do Sunny.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, this movie is all over the place. It's about baseball. It's a serial killer movie. It's about fathers and sons. It's about New York. What else is it about? What else am I forgetting here?
It's about the Aurora Borealis.
Yes, science, the Aurora Borealis, the space-time continuum. There's a little Back to the Future in this movie.
Yeah, there definitely was a flux capacitor in that ham radio.
Yes, and I should point out, because I know George is going to lament this fact for the next 2 hours, this is a movie that celebrates the 1969 New York Mets, which is wonderful for George, who, you're not a Mets fan, are you?
No, I'm not. So I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, which, if it wasn't for 2016, so the Cubs won a World Series in 2016 for the first time in, what was it, 116 years? 108 years?
I think it was 300 years.
Yeah, it was 108 or 116. That's a number that should be on my head. But yeah, but they had some heartache, not as much as the Red Sox had before they finally won, but 1969 was one of those heartaches. The 69 Mets, everyone remembers the amazing Mets. They were in last place almost every year, and the Cubs had the Cubs had a huge lead in the division, and then just in September they choked. Most famously, there was a game where Ron Santo, who was the Cubs' third baseman, was in the on-deck circle, and out of nowhere, out of the stands, a black cat comes out of nowhere and starts circling him. And it's an iconic image, and it just was so fitting. Obviously, the black cat wasn't what doomed the Cubs, but they ended up choking down the stretch. They lost a 7-game lead and ended up losing by 7 games or 17 or just something ridiculous. So, the plot of this movie revolves around the Mets and how the father and son relate about the Mets, and that's how they figure out that the son is from the future because he knows what happens in that Mets World Series. And I was thinking about it, and if the 2016 World Series hadn't happened and I was living this, if my father had passed away and we were talking over 30 years over the radio, and I had to talk about the 1969 season and, tell him what was going to happen ahead of time, this movie the plot would have been a bunch different. Instead of saving his life, I think he would have took his own life and took my mother in a murder-suicide, and I probably wouldn't end up being born.
Yeah, that's an entirely different movie. The George telling his father about the 69 Cubs, and then his father puts a shotgun in his mouth. That's not quite the same movie.
No. Thankfully, the shotgun in this movie is used for much better plot reasons.
Yeah, and it's funny because George only pointed this out before we started this podcast, that there is no bigger movie that's ever been a bigger celebration of the New York Mets than this movie, Frequency. Like, it's practically masturbatory about how much you must love the Mets to like this movie. And I happen to pick someone who hates the Mets with a passion and is a Cubs fan. So I'm glad you pointed out the irony to me before we started.
Well, hates is probably a little hardcore. I don't hate the Mets like I would the Cardinals or some other Cubs rivals. But again, 2016, when you finally win a World Series, it took away the pain and hey, let everyone have their World Series. The Mets, they've been long suffering for a while, long suffering since 1986. They can have one now too. I forgive you.
Yeah, and I should point out that I'm a Seattle Mariners fan, so I don't have anything to say about anything because we're terrible always. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that would be your rendition of the 2001 season. Your rendition of Frequency would be the 2001 Mariners season, where they have the most wins ever on a team, and then they do their own choke job.
I'm going to cut that right out of the episode. There's no way I'll ever include that, right? Okay, so just to clarify, George does not hate New York, even though I said he did. But you were cheering on 9/11, correct?
Yes, like Donald Trump said, I was on a rooftop cheering when the towers were going down.
Okay, just wanted to get that on tape for future purposes so I can get you fired from a job. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so anyway, yeah, really good movie from 2000. In fact, I want to give a little plug here. I just started a Letterboxd account. I never was on that website ever. I just want to let people know. Go to letterboxd.com/Mario Lanza. You can see my reviews. I try to review every movie I've talked about on Staff Picks. Frequency is one of those I will give a 5-star rating automatically. There's no way I wouldn't, because I love this movie so much. And again, it's really kind of unknown these days. Have you found that experience as well?
Well, yes, nobody knows it. However, I'm not even sure if you know this, but 5 years ago, they tried to remake this as a TV series.
I did hear that, but I never saw it.
No, well, nobody did, because that's why it was only on the air, and of course it was on the CW. But they, as they often do when they remake a show, they change, the nationality or the gender. In this case, it was the gender of the star. So instead of Jim Caviezel as the main character, they had a woman who was the daughter of the fireman. It was an actress named Peyton List who was in Mad Men, and the only time I had seen that name, and Mario, you
I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
Yeah. So I saw that. I was like, this movie was 2016, and I was trying to put the math together because the only Peyton List I had heard of, she is one of the stars, young stars of Cobra Kai. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to figure out how she could have been in a movie 5 years ago as like an adult cop, and yeah, it blew my mind. So apparently there are 2 actresses in Hollywood named Peyton List.
Wow, I had no idea. I just assumed she was like 40 and she looks like she's 15.
I don't know that I can address anything in that statement.
Okay, this is going to be a tough one to get through. Okay, here we go. So, yeah, Frequency, this 2000 movie. And it's funny, I often say, I think I've mentioned it on Staff Picks before, my all-time favorite year for movies is 1999. Because, like, every movie that came out the year was amazing. Like, there's literally, like, 25 movies from that year I think are really good. And in this movie, I always want to include in 1999, but it's not. It's actually 2000. So I will honorarily put it in the 99 movies because I think it's that good. But, yeah, it's just this hidden little gem that I think is so fun, and there's so many cool moments in it, and it's, like, exciting and tense and sad and funny and heroic. Like, it's just all over the place. Although, I did read a little trivia about this, George. I don't know if you knew this. Do you know, when they wrote this movie, who they wanted to star in it instead of Dennis Quaid?
You gotta tell me, Chief.
Oh, so I see you've read it. Yes. Sylvester Stallone. This movie was written for Sylvester Stallone.
I could see it. I mean, he did play some dramatic things like Copland. He was good in Copland as a slow cop.
Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely think he would have been great in this. I'm just shocked he passed on it. Like, Stallone has forever wanted people to take him seriously as a dramatic actor. And he's crossed over a couple times. And this movie was so perfect for him. I could totally see it. And I read he turned it down because of money reasons. They didn't pay him enough. But, like, I really wish he would have been in this. As much as I love Dennis Quaid, I would have loved to see Stallone in this movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I got nothing to say to that.
All right, good. Hey, he's not the best color man in the league for nothing.
Exactly.
But, okay, going back to Dennis Quaid. It's another thing I think I've talked on Staff Picks about as well. I think we just mentioned it in the Dreamscape episode, which will be released before this one. But, damn, Dennis Quaid has done a lot of great movies over the years. Like, I don't think he ever gets enough credit for that.
No, speaking of all the baseball that's in the movie, I think The Rookie is an outstanding movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that would be a staff pick at some point because I don't hear many people talking about it in terms of the all-time best sports movies. But I love the Rookie.
Yeah, I love just about any movie he has ever been in, and The Rookie is one I have definitely considered for staff picks because for people who maybe not know the history, Dennis Quaid, really big star in the 80s, really charismatic, likable, super charming. Just I love this guy. And then he kind of disappeared for a while, and I don't know why. And then like every movie he made after that was like his big comeback, like Frequency, The Rookie. There's a couple others in there I kind of forget, but like I don't know why he needed a comeback. He was never bad.
I don't know this if this is the answer, but he did have the long marriage with Meg Ryan, mm-hmm. and perhaps there was something with that with them. Dirty laundry going out there or whatever. But no, he to me is just he's got that the Hollywood idol good looks, but a guy wants to have a beer throw a football with him or whatever. So he's likable to both men and women.
Very good. Yes, you can address that, just not the 15-year-old Peyton List comment.
Again, I revert to my previous statements, Your Honor.
All right, I'm glad your lawyer is present with you for this podcast.
Thank you.
Okay, so one other thing I want to talk about this movie. It's such an irresistible plot device to me, and it's funny because I've read some reviews of this movie that call the plot contrived or predictable. Like, I don't necessarily think it's contrived or predictable. I would fully admit there's plot holes anytime you deal with the space-time continuum and you start changing the past and it affects history. Naturally, there's going to be plot holes. So I can overlook a lot of those. But the fact that people say this plot is contrived, I don't care. I don't give a shit that it's contrived, because I think it's so irresistible to for a person in one era to talk to a person in another. In fact, you may not know this. I'm really going to pull something obscure out of my butt here. But this movie reminds me of my all-time favorite Twilight Zone episode. Now, are you a Twilight Zone fan?
No, I am a chicken and I don't watch scary things, so you'll never have me on one of your horror movie ones. But you have inspired me to watch a few horror movies. We've discussed that. Well, The Interview?
Oh, The Invitation.
Invitation. I watched The Invitation. Not really a horror movie, a thriller, and I loved it. So, no, not a Twilight Zone fan.
Okay, I will just clarify that a little by saying I love recommending horror movies to people who don't like horror movies. I specifically search for stuff that's not slashery or bloody or tortury or jump scary. So The Invitation is right up my alley. I love movies like that. Okay, so anyway, the Twilight Zone, there's the original Twilight Zone back in the, 50s, 60s, I forget. And then they remade it in the 80s called the New Twilight Zone. And my all-time favorite Twilight Zone episode is actually in the 80s. It's a remake. It's the modern Twilight Zone, and it's called. I will give you a recommendation for anybody who wants to go track this down. It's called A Message from Charity, and it came out in 1985, and it's about a boy who gets some kind of fever, scarlet fever or something, in 1980, and he somehow telepathically connects with a girl back in the Puritan era who also has scarlet fever, and they can start to talk to each other through their thoughts. And it's such a neat little premise of people learning about each other's eras through this thought process. And this movie it's not an exact rip-off of that, but it's the same premise. So I just want to throw that out to people. Go watch A Message from Charity. And I will even tell George it's not scary in the slightest. It's actually more touching than scary, that episode.
I mean, technically, we are talking to people in the future, and we might be able to change their future by the words we have. So,
I'm not sure we're the two that you want changing the future for people.
If you're listening, John and Marlene, don't get married.
All right. So, with that, are you ready to delve into this? I don't even know. I guess this is a sci-fi movie, but it's really funny. It's more of a serial killer movie than anything. But are you ready to dive into this one?
Spirit and guts. I'm ready.
All right, little chief, let's go. All right, so this movie takes place in two different time periods, and it's really well done because they tend to intercut between the two eras. You have 1969 and you have 1999, and a lot of the times the scenes will be going on simultaneously in both eras. So hopefully we can do that justice. You think we have that kind of ability, George?
Yes, no, absolutely. Let's see. Yes, Mario.
Wow. Okay, well, I'll give you the honor. So we'll start in 1969. 1969 is the story of a firefighter named Frank Sullivan, played by Dennis Quaid, and kind of explain his life to people, because he's really the main star of this movie.
Frank Sullivan is a fireman. He is called to this fire. We see him starting off right away on the truck, heading to a fire, and right off the bat, one of the first lines of dialogue is about the World Series, so we're getting the Mets in there already. And this first call that they're going to is a fire at what is it, a bank? Because there's a big vault. It was at a bank.
I just know it's mostly underground. It's in the tunnels under something.
Yeah, there's some sort of vault that they have to bust open, and they tell them, of course, just like every fire movie, don't go in there, it's too dangerous. But Frank has to go back there because there's people still to get. He gets into this room, and there's the most terribly special effect wire that's electric and getting close to the water and is going to electrocute these people. But Frank goes in there and gets the guy and saves him. And just as they're coming out of the manhole, just like every action movie from the 80s or the 90s, it blows up just as they get out there, and there's big flames and a tanker truck blows up, and we find we got the hero shot already of Dennis Quaid as Frank.
Yeah, Frank Sullivan is a tough, no-nonsense New York City firefighter. He's got a wife named Julia, got a little boy named John. Just man's man, smokes, talks like a guy, real thick New York accent. Anything I'm leaving out about Frank?
He rides a motorcycle.
Yeah, he's just a man's man.
Yeah, and they, to hammer it home, if you didn't get that he was a fireman, they play the old ditty, "Here's a heat wave."
Yes. Yeah, so Frank is the star of our movie, and he's very brave. Again, New York firefighters historically, firefighters in general, I don't know why they have to be New York, but New York firefighters, very known for being brave, perhaps a little daring and reckless, which is going to be a big plot point in this movie. He takes risks that he probably shouldn't, and he is the hero of our movie. Although, we really have to talk about the year here, this 1969 World Series, because I don't think non-baseball fans would understand the significance of that year in New York. So I'll turn this over to you. Why is that such a big year for someone in Queens, New York?
1969, that would be the Son of Sam year, right?
No, we're talking about the amazing Mets, your favorite team of all time, you said.
Oh, oops. Yes. So the Mets, yes, as I said earlier, the Mets were perennial doormats. Always finished last, or I think maybe second to last one year. They were terrible, but this year, I think it was their 8th or 9th year in existence. They catch fire at the end of the season. They end up winning something like
I have no idea, honestly. I'm just letting you go for this one. I don't know the Mets.
So the Mets win 38 of their last 49 games. This was the first year that they had divisional era. So instead, before that, it was just the top team in each league made the World Series. Well, they actually had divisional series, and they were the first expansion team to win a division and the pennant, and then eventually the World Series. So all in New York, New York was always a Yankees town, and then they had the Giants who moved away and the Dodgers who moved away. So and then the Mets came along, and they were only in existence for that long, and they were always terrible. So, but this year, as I said, the Cubs choked more than the Mets. Now, the Cubs choked more than the Mets won it, but no, the Mets deserved it. They blew by everybody, and they kept on going in the World Series, and they make the World Series against the Baltimore Orioles.
Okay, yeah, I'm just going to summarize this a little for non-baseball fans. This is a big deal. Like, baseball fans, George and I are baseball fans. We know the 69 Mets off the top of our head. That's like one of the most famous things in baseball lore, this Mets team coming out of nowhere to win the World Series, win the hearts of the fans. Absolutely beloved in New York, still to this day. Mets fans still love the 69 Mets. So it's really significant that this movie is set in 1969 in New York. In fact, the day that Dennis Quaid, gets everybody out of the fire on the very first scene of the movie, we are told is the day before the 1969 World Series. So this is really significant to the story. And with that, so he comes home after his first day as being a hero for his big day of being a hero firefighter, and he comes home and he fires up his one hobby in the world. And this is the one thing that's really significant to the movie, that Frank has a hobby that is kind of nerdy at the time, but of course it's what our story is based around. And what is that hobby, George?
Ham radios.
Now, have you ever personally used or even seen a ham radio?
I've never used one, but I do want to say my father may have had one. No, I take that back. My dad had a CB radio in the van, mm-hmm. And he would use the CB radio sometime when we were traveling to give us kids a kick. We'd be driving down the interstate, and he'd get on there, and breaker, and some truck driver would get on, and it'd always make us laugh.
Okay, let's clarify this a little, because again, for my younger listeners, this is a historical relic that's even older than George and me, and we're both older than most of my listeners. Explain to people what a CB radio is, and then what a ham radio is, and what the difference is.
So CB radios were in your car, and there was a couple of channels, and they were normally used by truck drivers or emergency vehicles, police. But for common people, it was truck drivers who would use to communicate with each other to let people know that there was a traffic, or let each other know there was traffic, or a Smokey that was had a radar out there. But normal people could get them as well, and talk to each other, talk to truck drivers to make their kids giggle like my dad did. Ham radios, even dorkier. I can't tell you really about the technology of it, but you, as we find out in the movie, you have to have a license to have a ham radio. And not sure how the technology works. You probably need the Aurora Borealis to use them anyway, but the waves go out there, bounce all around, and you're able to talk to other people that have ham radios, potentially on the other side of the world. It is just other enthusiasts who are into this thing. So basically, maybe the chat roulette of the pre-internet era.
Yes, that is such a perfect comparison. That's exactly. I was trying to think of a modern comparison. A ham radio is really you are your own radio station. That anybody could be a radio station. You could send out your waves anywhere in the world, or I guess within a 20-mile radius. I don't know exactly how it worked. And other people would get on, and you could talk to each other. And I love that you called that dorky, as here we are doing a podcast where we're doing the exact same thing.
Well, it's your podcast, dork.
Yes. Yeah, so a ham radio is a thing they would have had back in the, I don't know, maybe 50s, 60s, 70s. I honestly don't know. I've never personally seen one. But, yeah, people would have these, and they'd broadcast, and they'd have call letters, and they just get on there, and that's what Dennis Quaid does at the start of the movie. He just gets on and starts talking to random people. And what's significant about this movie is we'll see it all throughout the movie. There's like a weird Aurora Borealis, the northern lights going over New York, which very rarely ever comes down that south. It's kind of a natural phenomenon. And because of this, he's going to somehow communicate with someone in the future. And with that, we're going to jump ahead to 1999, and we're going to meet his son, Johnny, who we saw earlier in the movie. Now he's John Sullivan, and he is a police officer. So let's talk about John a little bit.
So John is, to me, kind of a quintessential movie cop. He's drinks a lot. He's got a girlfriend that's got problems with him because he won't change. He's tied to the job. He's pretty much a stereotype of a police officer in a movie.
Yeah, and his girlfriend dumps him at the start because he's emotionally unavailable. He has kind of a sad life. That's what we're kind of led to believe about John.
Well, that could happen when your dad dies 30 years ago in a fire.
Yeah, okay, so we learn a lot of backstory here, and I'm going to kind of set it up. So John is home all by himself, and I think you mentioned earlier played by Jim Caviezel. Is that how you pronounce his name?
I have no idea.
All right, we're going to go with that. And he is John Sullivan, and he's got a buddy next door named Gordo, and Gordo comes over with his kid, played by... Now, I always forget that he's in this movie. Michael Cera?
Yeah, Michael Cera plays the kid, and he's sitting there, of course, playing PlayStation or Xbox or whatever the heck it is, playing the Mets. And I rewound it a lot. I'm pretty sure it's John Olerud that it's at the bat when we first meet Michael Cera.
Wow, future Met. So there you go. Or I guess he was out on the Mets at the time. But yeah.
Yeah, he was on the Mets at the time.
But yeah, this is Michael Cera from Arrested Development and Superbad and other things. Very young. You almost don't recognize him. I'm like, I swear, every single time I watch this movie, it takes me a minute to say, hey, is that Michael Cera? And then I always forget.
Yes, and we also we meet Gordo, John's best friend, who is reading through the newspaper and laments that Yahoo lost another 5 points today, or went up another 5 points today, and says, woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah, Gordo is a stock investor who never bought into Yahoo, which is the big stock at the time. Kind of a time capsule of 2000. Just remember that no one's talking about Google stock yet. We're talking about Yahoo. So anyway, yeah, the big setup here is these Gordo and his son come over to talk to John, and I forget what happens, but the little boy, Michael Cera, says, hey, can I look through your closet for something to play with? John's like, yeah. And he digs out Frank Sullivan's old ham radio. And this is where we learn the backstory, right, of all this, of what happened to Frank when he was younger.
Yeah, John finds the chest. He's like, oh, yeah, that was my dad's old stuff. And he opens it up, and the first thing he takes out is a shotgun and hands it to the kid to go have a good time. No. But there is a shotgun in there. But then, that's where we learn all what happens. It's the old ham radio, but there's all sorts of newspaper clippings and photos. But they want to play, the kid wants to play with a ham radio because even though you'd be bored in 10 seconds as a kid nowadays with a ham radio, it's a new shiny thing and he wants to see it.
Yeah, and to be fair, George Michael Bluth is kind of a dork.
Yes, he.
All right. So yeah, this is where we learn the backstory that Frank Sullivan at the start of the movie in 1969, big hero, firefighter, had a perfect family, perfect life. He dies the day after that first scene. He dies on October 10th, 1969, in a warehouse fire. And we learn all this in this scene that John is growing up without a father, never really knew his dad. He was like 6 when his dad died. So it's left a huge gaping hole in his life growing up without a father. And seeing this ham radio kind of reminds him of it because, as we learned, the kids were never allowed to touch Frank's beloved ham radio when they were in the house because, as Frank would say, this is not a toy.
Yeah, the accents. You said sounded good earlier, but to me it was not a good accent. It sounded like some combination of like Peter Griffin with the super fans SNL Bears guys. The Bears. I don't think it was a good New York accent, but apparently I hate New York, as Mario says.
It sounds like he got really Italian for that one sentence.
During the day, you could shoot a band with China.
Yeah, so they pull out the ham radio, and John kind of explains. Again, it's set up so he can just explain it to Michael Cera what this ham radio is. He's like, oh, they used to have these back in the day. You could talk to anybody. You could talk to China. It was great. And the kid's like, oh, sweet, can I use it? And they're starting to set it up. They want to play around with the ham radio, but the kid gets called. I think he has to go work in the banana stand or something. I think he has to leave.
Well, that's where the money's kept.
Yeah, so John is basically left home all alone with his ham radio, his dad's old ham radio from 30 years ago that he pulled out of storage. And this is where we get the first really sci-fi interesting scene of this movie where John fires up the ham radio and a strange voice comes out of it that he wasn't expecting.
Yeah, he starts talking to this voice of this guy who says, I'm from Queens, and they start talking. He says, oh, you must be an old timer if you're still using this things. Oh, you're from Queens too. You're psyched for the series. And Johnny says, I don't follow baseball anymore. So they're dancing around the fact that they're not realizing they're 30 years apart.
Yeah, so John announces he's not really into baseball. Frank's like, what are you talking about? Everyone loves baseball. We love the Mets. He goes, in 100 years, that's what they're going to talk about when they talk about America. It's going to be the Constitution, rock and roll, and baseball. And I think my accent's even worse than his, actually.
Yeah, that wasn't good. That sounded more like Virginia or something. I don't know.
I'm trying to do John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, so that's my only frame of reference for New Yorkers. Anyway, so yeah, father and son don't realize who the other person is. They just think they're talking to some other random guy from Queens, and Frank is confused, all right, because this is where John starts saying, oh yeah, the amazing Mets in the World Series, blah blah. He starts talking about it as if it's happened in the past, and Frank's like, what do you mean? That's tomorrow. The World Series is tomorrow. So they haven't quite grasped what's going on. They're a little confused by this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, and the wife comes in to of course interrupt it before they really realize what's going on, and this is when you first see Frank's face. You kind of know it's him, but you actually see that it's Frank talking to the son this whole time, and the dog comes in the room, and Quaid kind of kicks the dog and it cracks the glass, and then in the future, with Caviezel standing there, you see the glass change on the door. That's right there by the ham radio. So this is the first little glimpse we get of things in the past changing things in the future.
Yeah, I like that little reveal. I like the way they do that. For people who have never seen it, 1969, Dennis Quaid bumps a little glass, and they're in the same house, just 30 years apart. And when Dennis Quaid bumps the glass, the crack appears in the 1999 version instantaneously. And they're going to use that to great effect later in the movie, where Frank will be able to pass messages and later things to his son through 30 years, which is really kind of interesting.
Yeah, and they use the Back to the Future picture, that you keep looking at a picture and things changing, which in this movie, they showed the picture a lot, and half the time I couldn't figure out what changed. It was like those puzzles where you find the 5 differences between the 2 pictures, and I'm going, is the mom missing? Who is it? The dad? Who's missing in the picture?
Yeah, there's one reveal, especially right towards the end of the movie, where something dramatic happens, and you think the future is going to change, but it doesn't. And John looks at the picture, and we only get a split second, and we're supposed to immediately see what the difference is. And I'm like, what the hell changed? And they cut away before you can tell. It's like it made me laugh. Okay, so we have this little brief interaction between Frank and his son, his future son, his current son, whatever, just 30 years apart through. Now, I guess we have to kind of dance around the science in this a little bit, because they really do try to explain it in the movie, how people can talk over 30 years of time. Now, how much do you want to delve into this?
Yeah, well, there is some science in the Brian Greene is the guy who's talking on TV about the Aurora Borealis and parallel universes and whatever. So there is some science, whatever, to it. I've heard the whole Einstein time travel, the difference between if you're on the train or at the station. I don't know. I don't get it, and I don't care. It touches my heart when I watch the movie, and I think about my dad, so I think we can skip through all this.
Yeah, okay. The only thing I want to say is there's mention in the movie of how time can be folded on top of each other. It's like quantum time or quantum physics or something. I'm not nearly smart enough to understand any of this, but they do in the movie attempt to have little people on the news talking in the background about the Aurora Borealis. So they do try to explain how time can kind of fold on itself. And like George said, we're going to skip right over that because I don't even want to bother getting into it.
Yeah, all the paradoxes that you see in all the different movies, at least as opposed to Back to the Future, at least there's no scene where your mom comes on to you in this one.
Well, my favorite is the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, when they just say, hey, we'll go in the future and do this, and then it'll happen. So at least this movie doesn't go that far.
I mean, it basically does with the wallet.
All right, we'll get to that. Okay, so yeah, we're just kind of teasing you in case you haven't seen this movie. We're going to change a lot of the future through this movie, and like in a good way and a bad way. Then they have to correct something you screwed up, you killed people. There's a lot of future space-time continuum goofiness going on here. So we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so we're in 1969. It's the day of the Game 1. It's the day of Game 1 of the 1969 World Series. Frank pulls out the old TV. It's a huge block party. Everybody in Queens gathers to watch the game, and we see, Frank, his neighbors, little Gordo, little John, his wife, and then his buddy Satch, who's going to become very important to this plot. So I'll let you talk about Satch here.
So Satch is Andre Braugher, which is an actor who's been around for a long time. At least I know, and I think a lot of people would know him as Chief Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's interesting to see him in this role. But he plays Satch, which when I heard it in the movie, I said, Satch, are we going to get a reason why he's called Satch? Is his last name Satcharelli? But no, we have no idea. So the only Satches I've ever heard in my life are Satchel Paige and Louis Armstrong, who was called Satchmo or Satch. So we never find out in the movie why he's Satch, and that disappointed me. So maybe I need to go back in time to when he got that nickname to find out what it was. Of course, then I'd probably change his nickname. A picture of him would change. He'd never be in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I don't know.
Yeah, that is the message that really comes across from this movie. Don't fuck shit up, really.
Yeah, you think you fix things, but 3 other things go wrong.
Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to debate how we want to talk about this plot, because it's going to get really convoluted and complex real quick here. Let's talk about 1999, the future. Future John, the cop. He's in the middle of a serial killer investigation, and this is important to the plot. You don't realize this is actually the main plot of the movie until later. You think it's about the father and son, but it's really going to become about stopping a serial killer. But in 1999, they discover some bones of this girl who turns out to be a victim of a serial killer from the 60s who is known as the Nightingale Killer. And they don't know that yet. They just realize these are some old bones they dug up. It's a case from the late 60s. File that away from now. We'll come back to that later. Is that, I think, appropriate to say?
Yeah, not the Nightingale Killer, not to be confused with the Night Owl Killer, which I was saying in my notes quite a bit. I was getting it confused with LA Confidential.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. So I'm sure that won't confuse anybody. So good job. Okay, so now we go to back in the 90s that John goes to visit his mom. And again, this is she's played by Elizabeth Mitchell. You may know her from Lost, some other stuff. I forget exactly, but she's really good in this. And we learn more about how John just grew up with a mom, never had a dad, and she kind of explains, your dad was a big baseball fan, just a kid that never grew up. He would have loved you so much. And we learn that tomorrow, October 10th, 1999, is the 30-year anniversary of the father's death. And I think this is where we really learn the details of the death, right? How he died in a warehouse fire.
Yeah, this is probably the first little, chill moment, father-son thing where you really catch the gravity of, hey, this is a kid who hasn't had his father for so long. He's just, he wishes he could remember him better, and he's looking up at those northern lights. And then, of course, now it cuts, back to getting back to the ham radio, our device that gets the two together all this time.
Yeah, this is a really beautiful scene. There's a couple some of the most beautiful scenes of any movies I've ever covered on Staff Picks. The second conversation between John and his dead father over the radio. And to set this one up, there's a lot going on. I had like 4 pages of notes just on this scene alone. If I recall, in their first conversation, John said, oh yeah, the Mets are going to win Game 1 of the World Series, blah, blah, blah. And Frank kind of blew it off. But now Game 1 has happened, and everything that John said did happen, and so now they meet up on the radio again, and now Frank is starting to believe this guy actually might be a little something special. Like, how did you know what was going to happen in the World Series? And I think this is where they actually start realizing who they're talking to.
Yeah, he's how'd you call Buford's home run? And that's when he says, the game happened 30 years ago. Yeah, right, 30 years ago. So I suppose you could tell me what happened in Game 2, which reminded me of Back to the Future. And who was the president? Ronald Reagan, the actor. It was kind of the same feel to me. But yeah, Game 2, top of the 9th, Al Weiss, game-winning RBI single. Brooks Robinson grounds out to the end of the game. And then you hear a small little voice. Daddy, come up and sing the baseball song. And Dennis Quaid, hey, little chief, I'll be there in a minute. So he ends up hearing his own voice 30 years in the past.
Yeah, I believe as you said earlier, that is a chill moment. You kind of get chills down your spine when John realizes he's talking to his dead father and he hears his dead father talking to 6-year-old him. Like, that is a wonderfully creepy / beautiful moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where he said, what you call your son Little Chief? And you said your name was Frank. Frank Sullivan is, and then then Dennis Quaid as a father and the kid involved, he gets defensive. Is this some kind of, joke? Stay away from my kid. You live at this address. It's, it gets really heated between the two.
Yeah. Although there's one little detail I think we're forgetting. What eventually proves to each other that they are who they say they are is Frank announces what his call letters are, and John looks down and sees those are the exact call letters on the radio. And this is like the oh shit moment. I am talking to my dead father. And like you said, Dennis Quaid does not buy it at all. He is furious. Like, how do you know my son's name is John? I'll kill you. You come near my house, I'll kick your ass. Like, he's furious. And so at the start, Dennis Quaid's very defensive.
Yeah, and he gets so upset he knocks he's always smoking in the movie, and he tries to put the cigarette in the ashtray and he misses, and it hits glue and it catches fire. And he starts putting it out on the desk, and then in the future, you see on Caviezel's desk the stain, the burnt desk stain, and he says, "I can see the burnt stain on the desk."
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that moment. You see it in real time. The stain appears in 1999 because, again, if we're just accepting that you can change things instantaneously in the space-time continuum, that's how it's going to work.
So, of course, Caviezel, Jim, realizes, oh my God, this is my dad. I have to save his life. I have the opportunity to save the past. And he says, October 12th, 1969, tomorrow, you're going to die.
Yeah, this is a big plot device. Again, there's a couple huge plot twists in this movie, but this is the one that's this movie is based around, that John realizes my dad dies tomorrow. And the day that I'm talking to him in 1969, tomorrow is the date of his death. And he basically lays out the entire accident and how his dad died in real life and how his dad could have avoided it. So he tells his dad, even though Dennis Quaid still thinks this guy's a crank, John says, no, you have to understand, you're going to run the wrong way. You're going to go with your instinct. You're going to run away from the fire. It's going to blow up, collapse. You're going to die. Tomorrow, go against your instinct. And even though Dennis Quaid doesn't believe him, he hears that.
So, yeah, Quaid doesn't believe him, but the next day, the next scene, he's at the fire station. He's watching the baseball game. You can tell he's thinking about what the guy, Crank, the weirdo on the radio, was talking about with the baseball. And all of a sudden, sirens go off. It's a call. It's a warehouse fire, just like the dude on the radio said it was going to be.
Yeah, everything John has said from 1999 is coming true. And you can see Frank getting a little rattled because the World Series is playing out exactly like John said it would. Here's the warehouse fire. It's all happening exactly like John said it would. And the other firefighters they see it on Dennis Quaid's face in 1969. They're going to the fire. They can see he's a little nervous. They're like, are you okay? And Dennis Quaid, you can see it going through his head. I may die today. He may actually be telling the truth.
Yeah, and he sees the name of the warehouse, Buxton Seeds, because it was the Buxton fire.
Yeah, okay, so this fire scene is one of the big set pieces in the movie. And I have a little bit of trivia here that's kind of funny, but yeah, it's a really harrowing scene where Dennis Quaid has to run in this big burning building. There's a teenage runaway up on the top floor that's been squatting there. He has to run in there and rescue her. And he gets separated from his pack, right? He's all by himself because the stair collapses behind him.
Yep.
Yeah, and so how does he escape? Kind of explain that to people.
He escapes and it makes me chuckle because I still am not 100%, and hopefully you know, but he has no way out. The ladder won't go, or the gearbox on the ladder gets jammed, so they can't get the ladder up there. So he's thinking, and out of the blue is this little windy, like Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure, windy slide that is in the middle of this warehouse that shoots him out into the water.
Yeah, I don't really get the logistics behind that. I'm guessing that's somewhat historically accurate, but yeah, he just sits down and slides. So his instinct is to run out this door that has no flame. That's what he would have done in 69, and he would have died because everything would have blown up. Instead, he runs right into the fire, down this goofy Pee Wee Herman slide. I have no idea why it's there. Although, it does make sense. It's the Buxton warehouse, because Francis Buxton is the one that stole Pee Wee's bike, if you remember.
Nice.
So maybe it's a very subtle Pee Wee's Big Adventure reference.
You know, now that I think about it, I bet they make seeds. They probably put the seeds in big bundles or something, and they probably roll the seeds down this thing. It went out to the water. There's probably a boat out there that the seeds go into.
Yep, that's where Amazing Larry picks them up. I really hope somebody got that. Okay, so... So Dennis Quaid escapes. He was supposed to die in this fire. He slides down this little grain slide or whatever and gets out. And all of a sudden, it's like this huge moment that he has changed history. Dennis Quaid was supposed to die in this fire. He doesn't. And all of a sudden, in 1999, we get this really trippy scene of all these new memories flooding into John's head that weren't there before. Then you see it in his eyes. It's like you see it in his pupils as his eyes start dilating and acting all goofy. And like all of a sudden, now he has two memories. One of his life when his dad died and one where his dad survived.
Yeah, he's out at the bar with his coworkers, his friends, celebrating the life of his dad who died 30 years ago. And this happens in the past. And yeah, everything changes in his head at once. It's like he's living two lives at once. And all of a sudden he says, my dad didn't die in a fire, right? And I think it was Satch. What are you talking about, Johnny? He had cancer because of the cigarettes.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, about 1990, your dad died. So all of a sudden, John has an entire new backstory and all these new memories.
Yeah, everybody else is none the wiser. Only John has these conflicting memories in his head now.
Okay, I have to say a little trivia that I read about that fire scene that I just found amusing. That the plot device requires that Dennis Quaid pulls off his fireman's helmet and throws it out a window because he has to break the window. And then he slides down the slide to get out. He has to get some air in the room, so he breaks the window.
Whee!
Yeah. Apparently in real life, Dennis Quaid hurt his head because he bashed it into a board on the way down that slide. Ironically enough, had he been wearing his helmet, he would not have injured himself. So the plot required him to throw his helmet away. They did not have a second one for him, and that's how he hurt himself. So good job, Safety Patrol, on the movie Frequency.
Well, it's safer than an Alec Baldwin movie.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to go for the Alec Baldwin joke. Yeah.
Oh, now you're calling me a hack.
Yeah, so in 1969, Dennis Quaid survives, and he's like falls down in the water, and he saved this teenage girl, and he gets up, and he's just like flabbergasted. He's like, oh my God, everything that kid told, or everything that guy told me on the radio was true. That actually was my son. And he's like, you did it, little chief, you did it. And so now we're going to get really, I mean, I can't get through this next scene without crying, to be honest. Now we get the scene where they go home and Dennis Quaid talks to his son for the first time, and they really understand who they're talking to, and they basically just go over the entire history of their lives and share it with each other.
Yeah, you skipped a little thing where in the past, Frank writes with one of those wood-burning pens on the desk. I'm still here, Chief, to let him know, he survived the fire. You did it.
Yeah, and I forgot about that. Yeah, another little thing that he takes a little burning thing and burns on the desk, and that's how John knows his dad survived. And so here comes the big chat, which I just wrote in my notes, the magic talk. That's what I called this scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can't help but get chills on it. They both know now. Holy crap! I'm talking to my dad who died 30 years ago, or I'm talking to my son who at this point is 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And of course, you get the feels when he says, "You're still my little chief, right?"
Yeah, that's the thing. You think of this from John's point of view. He's talking to the father that he never knew. And like that, this is the whole premise of Back to the Future. If people don't think back to that movie, what the point of that movie was, that when they wrote that, Gale and Zemeckis, they're like, what would it be like to know your father back when he was your age? Because no kid is ever going to know that. You're never going to know your dad in high school. So this is that same premise. Like John and Frank are talking, and they're effectively the same age. They're both in their 30s, late 30s maybe. And so this has got to be really trippy to John to be talking about his father when his father was in his prime. But it's got to be doubly creepy and weird for the father talking to his 6-year-old son now that he's an adult.
Yeah, both of them have no memories of like what this person is. So of course they have to go through it all. Did you make the major leagues? No. Oh, so you're a firefighter, right? No, I became a cop. The one thing you didn't want me to be. And then they go through all the history things, kind of like Back to the Future when I joked before about Ronald Reagan, the president. 70 home runs. It's a record that'll never be beaten. And talking about cell phones and the Apollo space mission and all these things. You could go on and on talking, about future. But of course, then it all goes back to the World Series. He wants to find out how the whole series goes.
Yeah, the World Series will take precedence over everything, which probably was accurate for Queens in 1969, to be honest.
Yeah, everybody had amazing fever.
Yeah, but I got to point out, so John in the future says, Dad, even though you survived, you got to be more careful. I can't lose you again. He's like, it's so weird. I have good memories of you. I have memories when you're not here. It's so trippy. And the dad can't quite wrap his head around that. But John just says, you got to be more careful because I can't lose you. And he points out, you're going to die of smoking. And Frank, in the 60s, everybody smoked. So Frank thinks this is complete bullshit.
Yeah, he's smoking like a chimney all the time. He says, your grandfather smoked 2 packs a day and he's still fine. But yeah, he tells him he's got to quit smoking. And then, you get this pause in the conversation. It's like, hey, it's getting late. And here's where you get the Niagara Falls with our silent movie star Buster Poindexter. The I love yous across the 30 years. I love you, son, and I love you too, Dad, and I missed you. And yep, Niagara Falls.
Yeah, again, this is I just wrote in my notes that this scene tugs at the heartstrings really hard, so watch out if you're sensitive. And again, I don't have parents. I didn't know my dad especially well. This is a rough moment where the dad says, you're still my little chief, right? And like you said, says, yeah, I'm trying, Dad, I'm trying. And then at the end, I love you, Dad, I've missed you so much. And they don't want to hang up because this is all being caused by this weird aurora borealis. And they're concerned the minute they end this call, they may never talk to each other again. And that's the thing. In this movie, you're probably not going to see Dennis Quaid ever interact with Jim Caviezel because we know that he dies. So that's the thing. There's never really going to be a physical interaction between the two. That's why this is so special. This might be all they're ever going to have.
And Caviezel's on, the highest of highs, the best day of his life. He gets to talk to his dad. And, of course, he wants to talk to his mom about it. So before he goes to bed, he calls his mom, gets a machine, call me when we can, which ends up to be an important point.
Yeah, I had forgotten how, neck-breaking the plot twists and turns are in this movie. Like, the minute something good happens, something tragic will happen. And this is where we learned, as Doc Brown once warned us, don't change things in the past because it will have terrible after effects in the future. And that's why this day that Frank was supposed to be dying in the fire will now become the temporal junction point, in the words of Doc Brown once again, because Frank living is going to cause a terrible side effect.
And that terrible side effect is the mom dies instead of him.
Yeah. And again, this sounds convoluted in the plot, but it actually makes sense in the story that when Frank the fireman survives, he goes to visit his wife to celebrate the fact that he just didn't die in a fire. She's a nurse in a hospital. He goes and talks to her, and she is not supposed to be there in the hospital that night. In real life, her husband died. She was rushed home to mourn, to learn the news. She was not in the hospital that night. And apparently there was like an interaction, right? Some kind of drug interaction that some intern had put with had injected into a patient.
No, it was actually a doctor. She, nurses are the lifeblood of hospitals, as we found here with COVID. Nurses are the biggest heroes, and she sees a doctor who's going to go give some sort of drug to a patient, and she says, "What are you doing?" I'm giving him this. No, don't give him this. I gave him this when he was admitted, and if you give him that, he's going to die. And the doctor looks at the chart, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so Julia, the nurse, saves this patient's life. And unbeknownst to anybody in this movie, we talked about kind of yada-yada'd over it earlier. There's this serial killer in the 60s called the Nightingale Killer who just stopped. He stopped killing at a certain point. It was unsolved. That's what that body they found was. This man that she saves the life of in the hospital is the Nightingale Killer. We won't learn that until later. But, Frank being there unexpectedly saves the life of the serial killer who's now going to continue his crimes. And we're going to find out one of his future victims is John's mom. So by saving John's dad, John killed his own mother.
Yeah, and the next scene we've seen is totally, speaking of 1969, it's totally trippy. Where Jim Caviezel, good Lord, John. So we see John in bed having these terrible dreams, and he's seeing a funeral, and he's seeing his dad, and so he wakes up in the middle of the night, makes a call, and call his mother, and boom, it's not his mother's number anymore. He calls a deli. So he realizes, oh my God, I screwed up this in my life. What does he do next? He figures out another thing he screwed up in his life previously. He goes to talk to his girlfriend. She doesn't remember him. She has no idea who he is. She just knows, oh, you're a friend of Gordo's.
Yeah, he gets gaslighted. It's terrible. Oh, yeah. So John now has 3 sets of memories. He's got the memory of growing up without a father. He has a memory of growing up with a father and a mother. And now he has a memory of his mother dying when he was 8 years old or 7. I don't know, but it's he's just he has too many memories flooding his head. It's messing with him, and he goes into work. He's like, He's Satch. Like, he works with Satch. I guess we should clarify that earlier. I don't know if we mentioned that. Satch, the next door neighbor, grew up. He's the senior cop. John is more the junior cop, and they work together. And Satch is like, what's wrong? And so John starts saying, well, there's something wrong. I have all these memories, and, my mother and the Nightingale killer. And this is where Satch drops the plot twist about the Nightingale killer that, oh, yeah, your mom was killed by the Nightingale killer 30 years ago. Don't you remember that?
And, of course, he doesn't.
No. Yeah, okay. I'll sum this up. I don't want to get too convoluted in the plot. In real life, in 1969, this Nightingale killer was a guy who killed nurses. He killed 3 nurses, and then he stopped. And in the reality of 1969, it's because he overdosed at the hospital. They accidentally killed him with a drug interaction. He stopped, so that was the end of the case. So all the people like John know, oh, this is an old serial killer case where he killed 3 people. Now he looks at the Nightingale killer files, and he learns, no, he didn't kill 3. He killed 10. It's still unsolved, but my mom was one of the victims. And he's like, oh my God, what did I do?
So, of course, he's got to run to his dad and say, we got to fix this. We fixed it so great before. We killed Mom.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're laughing, but it's not funny in the movie. This is a terrible tragedy. Like, not only did they kill the mom, they killed 7 or 6 other women. They have a death toll of 7 at this point.
Yeah, and, of course, Frank's first thought is, we got to save the mom. And John says, yeah, we got to save Mom, but we got to save all these other girls too, because if we don't, we got to live with this the rest of our lives. We messed up big time.
Yeah, this is a horrible thing. And so that's the real plot of this movie. It's kind of funny. People remember it as the dad and son talking. And those are wonderful scenes, but that's just setting up the plot of this movie where there's this serial killer operating, killing nurses. Nobody's ever caught him. Nobody knows who he is. But John and Frank are going to kind of work together to stop this. And the deal is John knows the history. He knows the case files. He knows where the killer is going to be, who he kills, blah, 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 what his MO is. But Frank is going to have to go do all the dirty work and try to stop him each time. And so that's the teamwork here.
So, Frank has to be the cop, and he has no idea what he's doing. So John has to coach up his dad on how to make the firefighter a cop.
Yeah. Again, I like this. I know Roger Ebert didn't like this plot. I know some reviewers don't. I think it's pretty cool. I've never personally seen this in a movie myself, so to me it's not convoluted. But yeah, so Dennis Quaid has to go to this one woman, Carrie, someone was in a bar at 6:30. She left the bar at 7:30. They found her dead in an alley at 8 o'clock. So he's like, Dad, go to that bar and just kind of hang out and see what happens. And Frank, of course, wants nothing to do with this, but he kind of feels like he's beholden at this point. He has to.
So what does he do? Girls offer him a drink. He goes over there, and he just hangs out with pretty girls all night instead. Thankfully, one of the girls was the girl he was trying to save.
I love this. Okay, so yeah, Dennis Quaid is supposed to stop the serial killer and sit in the bar and observe, but he doesn't. Instead, he flirts with the victim, and it scares the killer away. And he's like, you know what? Fuck it. That worked.
Yeah, but then, next thing we find out is the body that they found was this woman, Mary Finelli, that they ID'd from the dental records.
Wait, the body they found in 1999. Clarify that.
Yes. So we find out now that the body that was found in 1999 was identified as this Mary Finelli through her dental records. She was reported missing in 1968. So John, being the great cop that he is, realizes, oh, that means she was the first, which means he probably knew her. And, we have something to go on finally. And he's still here in 1999. He's looking at the files and boom, the Carrie Reynolds file is gone. And he says he did it. His dad saved this woman's life.
Okay. Yeah. Two really important things to point out here. This is definitely the Silence of the Lambs subplot. I love that movie. I don't know if Georgia would be able to get through that one. That one might be a little horrific for you. Have you been able to get through Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah, I can watch killer movies. It's stupid slasher. Well, I'm sorry I said stupid with what I'm going to say next, but like Friday the 13th or those kind of movies, those are the ones I can't do.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, Silence of the Lambs, there's a big plot twist where when you find out who Buffalo Bill's first victim is, you know where his crime started because, in the words of Hannibal Lecter, we covet what we see every day. So if you know the first victim in the pattern, you can kind of tell where the killer lived. And so this body they found in 1999, John starts doing a little detective work, figures out her name is Mary Finelli, knows the killer, probably knew her. So we're going to have dual serial killer investigations going on simultaneously here. And it's going to be kind of confusing to talk about 1999 and 69. The dad and son are both doing detective work.
And this sets up what I think is, this movie has all been father, son, hit you in the feels kind of stuff. But now we get our first mother, son, hit you in the feels thing. Because as we know in the plot, the mother's dead in this reality, this third reality that we're at in the movie. And John gets on the ham radio to talk to dad. We did it. And in the background, Julia, his mom, is now there. And this gave me a little bit of a feels moment. To talk a little bit about my past is my parents got divorced when I was very young. And oddly, in these kind of situations, I lived with my father. My sister and I both lived with my father. So it was my mother that was the one that, I saw on weekends. And then we moved to Florida, so I would only see her, for vacations and stuff like that. So I had more of that long distance relationship with her. So in this case, the mother being there, and him having that conversation with mom, and he's lost his mom. Now, I didn't lose her officially, but I lost a lot of the relationship that most people have. So in this case, he's talking to Frank, and the mom comes on, and he's lost his mom in his reality, and he says he's talking about being a police, and my mom wouldn't let me have a gun, and she says, I bet she's proud of you being a police officer, and he says, I hope so, and he's getting choked up, and I hope she knows how much I love her, and she says, oh, she knows. Moms always know.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. It's a rough one. If you lost a parent, these scenes are going to get you when the kid's talking to his dead mom from 30 years ago. It's a tough one. And then he talks to himself. I always forget about this, that Dennis Quaid's like, hey, let me put Little Chief on. You can talk to this guy John. He's a cop. And little John's like, hello. And John's like, hey, little buddy, how you doing? Like, he's literally talking to himself. It's a really cute scene.
Yeah, but the best was Gordo when he gets to talk to Gordo, and Gordo comes on. I am an intergalactic traveler from the planet Earth. Yeah. It's like, all right, Gordo, you're a dork.
Yeah, Gordo, this little doofus redhead kid, comes on, and John. Now, in real life, John knows Gordo in 1999 as a failed investor who never invested in Yahoo and never got rich like all his friends. So John gives little 6-year-old Gordo some advice. Hey, there's one magic word I want you to remember your entire course of your life. And Gordo's like, really? What is it? And John's like, Yahoo. Just remember that word. Make that your mantra. Write it down. So he's going to ensure this kid's going to get rich one day. Although, it does lead to the question, why doesn't he give some get-rich-quick scheme to himself? You think that would help him? Hey, little chief, why don't you invest in Microsoft at some point?
Well, again, we already said at the beginning of this we weren't going to talk about the plot holes.
Yes. And to be fair, they've already killed 7 people by changing history, maybe more. So
yeah, if he gives them the Sports Almanac from 2000, it might make Saddam Hussein live or something.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. It's now a cop detective movie for the rest of the movie. Now, admittedly, they did not stop the serial killer, the Nightingale Killer. He was supposed to kill this girl, Carrie Reynolds. Frank didn't stop him. He just kind of prevented her from, Frank didn't catch the killer. He just prevented Carrie from dying. So, although there is a plot twist in a deleted scene, Carrie is now, because Carrie survives, she now walks into an orphanage and she detonates a suicide vest. So they've now killed 300 orphans as well.
Well, at least their parents won't be sad.
That's terrible. Okay, but anyway, they made one girl survive, and then she goes to blow up an orphanage. But now we have the second girl, and this is the one that's really going to get dicey. Where John tells his dad, "All right, now you got to stop the second murder. You did fine with Carrie Reynolds. Now her name's Sissy Clark. She lives in this apartment, so-and-so. She's going to die tomorrow. And here's the story. She leaves work at 2 a.m. She's killed in her apartment about 2:15 or 3 or something like that. And he's like, Dad, you got to follow this girl and make sure she doesn't die and see if you can find the killer. And he does say, Dad, be careful.
Fast forward, he is not careful.
He is not. He gets his ass kicked by the Nightingale Killer. All right, so anyway, this next scene, it's a good 20 minutes of movie. It's very tense, very well done scene where Frank is following the Nightingale Killer as John is investigating this girl, Mary Finelli, who's the first victim. Simultaneously, John finds a suspect, blah, 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 who lives next door or something. Or no, he's in her diary, right? It doesn't matter. Who cares? Anyway, John has a suspect that he thinks is the Nightingale Killer, but at the same time, we're going to see Frank utterly fail at his job to stop the Nightingale Killer. And so let's talk about that scene.
Yeah, Frank's not a cop, and Frank is hanging out at this bar, and the Nightingale Killer notices that it's the same guy that was hanging out at the bar with 3 pretty girls, one of which he wanted to kill a night or two before. So he realizes this guy is following him. So it's the end of the night. He wants to kill this person, but so Frank goes to the bathroom so he doesn't make it conspicuous that he's tailing the Nightingale Killer, and Nightingale comes in. Why the hell are you following me? Kicks the crap out of him, knocks him out, and takes his driver's license.
Yeah, this is very important to the plot. This is a neat little plot device. So the Nightingale Killer punches out Dennis Quaid, knocks him out, is going to strangle him. He's actually going to kill Dennis Quaid. He's got a little piece of cord that theoretically he's going to go use to strangle Sissy Clark later that night. He's got his little strangling cord. And he doesn't get a chance because other people are there. He can't kill him. So he's like, oh, this guy passed out, blah, blah, blah. He steals Dennis Quaid's wallet, but drops the wallet, just takes the driver's license. So at this point, the serial killer goes and kills Sissy Clark. He has Dennis Quaid's home address and name, which is very dangerous, but he has left a fingerprint on the wallet, and that's very important.
Yeah, and not only that, but he has the driver's license because Frank wakes up from being knocked out, goes to Sissy Clark's house, and banging on the door, it's the police, of course, raises the suspicions of the neighbors who are peeking out, and he ends up picking the lock with his credit card, gets in there, and finds the dead body. Oops, I guess this one didn't work.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what's going to happen is Dennis Quaid is going to get framed for these murders. Is that he happened to be there when a dead body was found. His driver's license is going to be left at the scene. The Nightingale Killer is going to frame him. So Dennis Quaid is going to be wandering in a world of shit here where they're going to think he's the Nightingale Killer because he knows a little too much about this. And this is going to be a problem. Now, we're not there yet. We're going to get there in a second. Let's talk about this wallet fingerprint scene first.
So they get back on the ham radio, and Frank, I screwed up. The girl's dead. I didn't do it. And in the conversation, Frank tells John, he stole my wallet. Oh, did he take anything from you? Oh, he just took my license. He goes, wait a minute. He touched the wallet. That means, as he's a police officer, that would have his fingerprints on there. So here's what you do. Be very careful. Take it out of your pocket. Put it somewhere where I can find it. Nobody else will find it for 30 years. So he's got one of those sitting nooks in a window in the house, and he lifts it up. He lifts the cushion, and there's a plank at the bottom, and he wraps it up in plastic, and Frank puts it under there. And in 1999, John an instant later lifts up the cushion that's there, lifts up the plank, opens it up, finds the plastic, and boom. It's right there, and he yells into the ham radio, I got it!
That is a great moment. That is a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Hey, I did steal my dad's keys. Wow.
Yeah, Quaid, Frank almost goes like, wow. I think he actually does give a Keanu Reeves, wow.
That's the big moment. That's the big time travel moment when Dennis Quaid hides the wallet from 1969 under the floorboards. It instantly appears under the floorboards in 1999, and his little son John, little Chief, now has a fingerprint, and now they can go match it and find who the Nightingale Killer is. And unfortunately, this is going to be very bad news when they find out who it is.
It's a cop.
It's a cop. Yeah. So it's funny. This is a little off subject, but I was just watching the movie The Dream Team the other day. Do you know the old comedy with Michael Keaton from the 80s?
I know it. I remember it. Michael Keaton and Christopher Lloyd and some, it's, what are they? People from like a mental asylum or something?
Yeah, they're mental patients that are going to a baseball game in Yankee Stadium for the day, and their doctor gets beaten up and assaulted and knocked unconscious. So it's 4 mental patients in New York for the day, and comedy ensues. And anyway, I was watching that in preparation for maybe doing a Staff Picks episode on it, but it's not good. It's terrible. But it falls into the trap that so many movies from the 80s fall into, where even though it's a comedy, all of a sudden it's a mistaken identity murder investigation and there's a crooked cop at the center of it, which is like so many mundane, mediocre comedies of the 80s, it drives me insane. They have to fall back on that crutch. I'm just laughing because I hate that subplot so much in The Dream Team, yet that's the exact subplot in this and it works fine in this one. Oh, it's a corrupt cop. Cool.
Well, there's, definitely no evidence of corrupt cops in 2021, so.
Yes. Thank you for dating the podcast, George.
There's definitely no corrupt cops in 2022 or 2023 or 2024.
Exactly. Whenever you're listening to this, I'm sure cops are all great. But yeah, so that's the thing in this movie, that the Nightingale killer back in 1969 was a cop. John gets the fingerprint hit from the wallet that his dad passed him. It's a cop named Jack Shepard. And John's like, oh shit, it's a cop? No wonder he got away with it. And turns out this guy is still partially active. He's a private investigator. And this is where we get the scene in the 90s where John goes to confront this guy who's now an old man and thinks he's gotten away with murder for 30 years.
Yeah, this was probably the scene that I liked the least in it, because it's just this. I know Ebert said the movie's contrived. This was the contrived scene to me, because the guy's just sitting at a bar, former cop, and John comes in to talk to him, hey, funny thing, you a former cop, you look like a cop. Yeah, I was a cop. And oh yeah, when were you? Oh yeah, funny enough, I working on one of your a case from back then, Nightingale murders. You might have heard of them. Missing teenager, found some bones, first victim, she probably knew the killer. The weird how those old bones happen, right? We all have skeletons in the closet. You just never know when they're going to pop up and bite you in the ass, huh, Jack?
Yeah, I do agree. This scene feels like it would only happen in a movie. In real life, they'd silently build the case behind the scenes and then surprise the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, don't tell the guy that you got something on him so he can try to do something about it.
Yeah, I'm going to arrest you for the Nightingale murders you did 30 years ago. By the way, my name is John Sullivan. I live at 234 Maple Drive if you'd like to come by and kill me at some point.
Yeah, I'll give Ebert this point.
Yeah, but we do learn that this guy Jack Shepard, the serial killer, not only killed all these 10 nurses back in the 60s, we also learn he killed his own mother, which is a wonderful little plot device. His mom was a nurse too.
Yeah, and this goes back to the beginning of the movie where John goes to visit Shepard's dad, who John visited at the beginning when they found that initial body, because it was like across the street where they found it. And we find out that the son, the son lived there. The son was a cop. And not only that, but there's the mother who John talked to before in the original reality. She's no longer around because she was brutally murdered and never was solved. So we just have to assume that that was the Nightingale's first victim before Mary Finelli.
Wow, I have to watch the movie again. I never caught that. So the mom is there at the start of the movie and then she's not later?
I believe so, but I'm going to double check it after this podcast.
Okay, yeah, so that's the premise of this movie. You had this serial killer back in the 60s. He killed his own mother, and then he changed his MO because he wanted to start killing other nurses. I guess he got enough jollies after doing whatever he does, the thing that makes him feel like God to his own mother, and then he had to do that to other nurses. But he changed his MO, so the cops never realized that his mother was part of the pattern. Otherwise, they would have caught him much earlier. So it's a really sick, twisted tale of this guy Jack Shepard, all these nurses he's killed over the years. And like George said, John announces, I'm going to catch you. I got you now. Although there is one good line here. He says, "You went down for this crime 30 years ago, pal. You just don't know it yet." Which, that's a good badass line.
All right, I'll give you that one.
But here we go. We think this movie's over. We think they've caught the Nightingale killer, and they've done it. John and Frank have done it. But now we're going to get the big plot twist, the one that's really serious, where Frank is going to be arrested in 1969 for being the Nightingale killer.
Yeah, because as we said, he had the wallet stolen, or not the wallet, but he had the driver's license stolen, and Satch, the cop, is the tip comes in like, hey, this murder, this is Frank's ID who's there, and he wants to talk to Frank like, hey, if you're messing around on the old wife, let me know, because if not, you're gonna get murder rap.
Yeah, this is a big deal, and this becomes very serious because Frank is going to be arrested and fingered for all the Nightingale crimes, and Satch has to come to arrest him, his best friend in the world. It's a horrific scene. Little Johnny's screaming. Julia, the wife, is screaming back in 1969. It's just a terrible scene. And in all the chaos of Frank's arrest, the ham radio gets knocked over. The biggest tragedy of them all. So all of a sudden, as Frank's going to jail, he's probably going to get charged with the Nightingale crimes, but he just lost all his connection to 1999. He will never talk to Little Chief again.
Yeah, so he's lost everything at this moment. He's going to jail. He's stuck. He doesn't have the person who can help him. Not only did he lose his son, he doesn't have the person who can help him get out of this because the ham radio is broken and he's going to be in jail.
Yeah, at this point, John has fucked up the future so much. It's like really terrible. He's made it so much worse. But okay, so most of the rest of the movie is going to happen in 1969 for a while because we've lost our connection to the 90s. John can't talk to his father anymore. So Dennis Quaid goes to jail, and Satch is like interrogating him. He's like, tell me what you know about the Nightingale killers. Why were you at the scene of the crime? Why was your driver's license under a body? Why do witnesses have you banging on her door? And Frank tries to tell him the truth, which is not going to go over real well, is it?
No, as it wouldn't when you say, I'm talking to my son over a ham radio, and he is six years old now, but I'm talking to him 30 years from now. He's a cop. He's told me all about these Nightingale's murders, and yeah, you got to believe me, it wasn't me.
Yeah, it was the one-armed man. We're going for the fugitive defense here. And
he's not a one-armed man yet.
Not yet. Little spoiler. Okay. So Satch wants to believe Frank. He doesn't think Dennis Quaid is a serial killer. But there's no evidence to prove that he's not. And Satch is like, help me. Give me something that can help me give you an alibi or prove you weren't there or prove you're telling the truth. Like, tell me something that will prove you are talking to your 36-year-old son in the future. Because he obviously thinks this is full of shit. And Frank does pull out something that he has because Frank actually knows something, and this becomes very important to the plot, why baseball was so significant to this movie. What does Frank have that will become very valuable? What kind of knowledge?
Frank does what John did to him. He tells Satch all about what happens in the World Series, and he tells him about the famous shoe polish game because that's the game that we're in right now. So the shoe polish incident was in the 6th inning. The Mets are down 3-0. Cleon Jones is coming to bat, and he gets hit in the foot by a wild pitch. They just think it's a wild pitch, but the manager just says, no, go out there, look at his shoe, look at the ball. I bet it's got shoe polish on it, and Cleon Jones has shoe polish on his shoes. So the umpire looks at the ball, sees the scuff mark from the shoe polish, and gives him first base. And Clenendon Jones. Don Clenendon, that's his name. That's a different guy. Don Clenendon comes up next, hits a 2-2 pitch into the bleachers, and then he tells what's going to happen in the rest of the game to get the Mets winning. So, of course, Satch is like, what the hell? What are you talking about? But Frank says, watch the game, and, you'll see that I'm right.
Yeah, this is one of the most distinct World Series of all time. Anybody who grew up in that era knows beat for beat how this World Series goes at the end. So Frank spells it out. Satch is like, that's bullshit. And Frank's like, just watch. It's going to happen. And so in the midst of all this, a couple things are going to happen at once. Julia, the wife, He's going to come down to the police station to find out what's going on. Satch is going to take her out to a coffee shop to kind of calm her nerves. She's like, is Frank cheating on me? Is Frank killing people? What's going on? So Satch is trying to calm her down. But while Dennis Quaid is left all alone in the holding cell, here comes the real serial killer, the Nightingale Killer, who has learned, again, he's a cop, he has learned they have arrested a suspect for the Nightingale crimes. He's going to come and basically force his way into the interrogation room, and he wants to basically kill Dennis Quaid because he knows Dennis Quaid has been on to him and he knows more than he lets on.
Yeah, so Jack Shephard, which is the name of the cop, which, interestingly enough, time travel, Lost was the main character of Lost was Jack Shephard as well, Matthew Fox. But Jack Shephard is the cop, and he comes in there, he pulls out his gun, and he says, you know, who the hell are you, and how do you know all this? So Shephard is in the interrogation room with Frank, and then we see Satch with Jules, the wife, and Satch is explaining that he's been talking on the ham radio. He swears he's talking to his son in the future, and Frank is going to go to jail unless, you know, something happens here. And in the background, we have the baseball game going on. The commentator is saying, oh, Cleon Jones hit with the ball. We might have a shoe polish play. Remember the Nippy Jones shoe polish play of the 1957 World Series in Milwaukee? Because that's how all commentators, of course, talked in 1969. So all this time that Satch and Jules are talking and Shephard has been called out of the interrogation room to talk to a cop who's asking him, why the hell are you here talking to this suspect? All this time, Frank is in the room, and he's a fireman. He knows how to put out fires, but he also knows how to start fires. He knows electrical things. So he gets a electric cord from the wall. He pulls it out. He opens up a fuse box because, you know, I always keep my fuse box in my interrogation room. And pours coffee all over the floor. So Jack Shephard comes back in the room and steps into the pile of coffee, and Frank hits it with the live wire and electrocutes Jack. The Nightingale Killer falls to the ground, and all the lights go off in the police station.
Yeah, so there's dual scenes going on that Satch is over there kind of watching the World Series out of the corner of his eye as he's talking to Julia and realizing that all the stuff that Dennis Quaid said is going to happen is happening. And he's like, what the hell? And he's watching the 69 World Series, and he starts to realize, because Julia is kind of backing up the story. Oh, yeah, Frank talks to this guy John on the radio every night. It's John. He's a cop. And so Satch is like, is Frank actually telling the truth? And so he basically realizes that maybe all this is accurate, and maybe the serial killer is a cop. So Satch goes running back to the station, but this is right when Dennis Quaid has outsmarted the serial killer and knocked him out. And it's kind of a little bit of retribution here. This time Dennis Quaid knocks out the serial killer, and he takes his wallet and his ID, basically to find out where the guy lives, right? He's just trying to get the guy's address.
Yeah, because John had told him, you know, if this guy's a serial killer, he's probably got trophies. He's got evidence at his house that's going to link him to the Nightingale.
Yeah, okay, and this is important, because the last part of this movie, it's very fast. A lot's going to happen a lot at once, simultaneously, action scenes. There's a lot of action here. So I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Dennis Quaid has the serial killer's address. He goes to the Nightingale's house. He fishes around, and he finds the box of evidence, all this jewelry that this guy has stolen from every woman he has killed, and that's the evidence the cops need. So the cops come, Satch and the rest of the cops come to bum rush this guy Jack Shephard's apartment because maybe Dennis Quaid was telling the truth. They find the evidence. They find all the stash. But in the interim, Jack Shephard has come home. He sees Dennis Quaid, pulls out a gun, and it's basically now one long gun battle for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, Frank escapes out the fire escape. Nightingale chasing after him, shooting him, chasing him down an alley into a dock district. They end up Frank disappears, and Nightingale doesn't know where he is, and Frank reaches up from underneath the dock and he pulls him into the water. So then you've got your you've got an underwater fight like they like to do in action movies, where the gun, of course, gets knocked out, and how long can they stay underwater? And eventually Frank is able to knock out the Nightingale and get up and catch his breath, and then the Nightingale disappears.
Yeah, so we're meant to think this is the finale of the movie, that Dennis Quaid has stopped the Nightingale Killer, he's beaten him up, stolen his gun, and he thinks the Nightingale Killer has drowned in the harbor, and he thinks he has stopped everything. And so really, he's the hero. This is the end of the movie. He has solved the crimes. The police found all the evidence in the Nightingale's apartment. Dennis Quaid has saved the day. But it's not quite over yet, because there's an epilogue in this movie that some people call goofy. I read one review that said it was unintentionally funny. It wasn't supposed to be funny, but it was. It's kind of action-packed. I don't know. We'll talk about this in a second, because we're about to get the dual endings here where 1999 and 69 are going to overlap literally.
So Frank thinks that he's done it, and he gets back home, and he gets the ham radio, and he starts to put it back together because he wants to talk to Lil Chief, tell him we did it. And he gets the tools out, and he goes to light up a cigarette, and he says, nope. He tosses them away. He says, nope, I'm not doing it. And he gets the ham radio repaired, and he talks to John. He says, Little Chief, I'm back. We did it. We stopped him.
Yeah, and John's like, I don't think so, because I still have a memory of Mom not being here. And this is, I think, where he looks at the picture, and it's no different than the picture before, so I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to notice there.
I think the mom was in the picture initially in the movie. It was like a retirement ceremony or something like that. So I think the mom used to be in it, but now she didn't reappear.
Okay. So it literally is like Marty McFly's siblings.
Exactly.
Okay. So here we go. Here comes the overlap scene. This is the big set piece action ending of this movie, where the serial killer Jack Shephard in 1969 is going to come in and attack Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid thinks this guy's dead. He thinks all is right in the world. He's got his family. They're all safe. No, Jack Shephard's going to come attack him in his house. Simultaneously, as the 1999 version of Jack Shephard, old Jack Shephard, comes and attacks John, the son. So we'll have two fist fights and gun battles going on at the same time in the same house, 30 years apart, and they can hear each other over the ham radio, which is trippy.
Yeah, which comes into play eventually. So Frank gets beat again, and Jack Shephard takes out his handcuffs, and he handcuffs some door frame, which, if I remember right, in 1999 you see the scratches or something on the door.
Probably. Yeah, that would probably be a good detail, yeah.
So Jack Shephard, back in 1969, goes up to now kill or whatever the mom, and gets into bed, and she thinks it's her husband. And he's getting ready to do something, and Lil Chief, when he was little Chief, comes in the room, Mommy, and startles Jack Shephard. So it gives the mom, Jules, a chance to fight, and she scratches Jack across the face. And she must have not had her nails done in 15 years, because she had like tiger claws, because she scrapes his face, and then in 1999 he's got these scars that look like a team of hyenas attacked him.
Yeah, I gotta say, I love that moment in the movie. In 1969, Julia scratches Jack Shephard, and in 1999 you see these scars instantly appear on the side of his face. That's a cool little moment.
So Jack in 1969 runs down the stairs to chase after the boy, and Quaid now has gotten himself loose. He got his tools to get the handcuffs off, and has the shotgun, and he's getting ready to shoot Shephard, and Shephard grabs Little Chief and says, drop the gun, or I killed a kid.
Yeah, this is really integral to the plot, and I just want to talk about this for a second. So the Nightingale Killer has the gun pointed at little Johnny's head, Little Chief, and he's going to kill him. And this is the end of the movie in 1969. If he shoots little Johnny, he's going to then shoot Dennis Quaid. He's going to go up in whatever with the mom. And this is going to end the Sullivan family. This is it. 1969. The whole movie ceases to exist at that point. That's where we are. But right before Jack Shephard can kill little John and kill Dennis Quaid, he's distracted. And I love this little device that In 1999, Jack Shephard says, "That's it, Sullivan, it's time to die." In 1969, Jack Shephard gets distracted by the sound of his own voice, and he turns to the right, and that's all Dennis Quaid needs, basically, to turn the tables on him.
Yeah, Jules comes running down the stairs like a banshee and jumps on Shepherd while he's distracted, and Little Chief gets to run away, and that gives Frank the opportunity to use that shotgun, and he uses it.
Yeah, okay, if you've never seen this is quite a scene where... In 1969, the Nightingale Killer reaches towards Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid pulls a shotgun out and blasts him right in the hand. Like, destroys this guy's hand. Just an explosion of blood, sinew, everything. It just disappears. And we immediately cut to 1999, and you see he's about to shoot future John, and the guy's hand just starts shriveling away like the Marty McFly picture. It just disappears, and you see it in real time. And he's like, what the hell just happened to my hand? It's a perhaps goofy, I don't know, like one review said, unintentionally funny, but it's a memorable little effect.
Yeah, it wasn't the best special effects, but, I don't know about you, but if my hand started doing that in real life, I think I wouldn't shoot somebody and I'd be pretty freaked out too.
Yeah, but anyway, it's this really goofy scene, goofy special effect. The guy's hand disappears, and all of a sudden, just the minute Dennis Quaid blows this guy's hand off in 1969, everything changes, and it's a really trippy scene where we're in 1999 now. This is little John, 36 years old. All of a sudden, his house changes. The furniture changes. The lights change. All of his memories change. There's more light in the house, more of a woman's touch. All of a sudden, his entire house is different. He's like, what the hell just happened? And now we get the big, exciting moment that I kind of set up earlier you were never going to see, but it does surprise you because you are going to see it here.
You hear the pump of a shotgun, and then all of a sudden, Jack Shephard gets shot in the stomach, and John is on the ground and doesn't know what the hell happened, and he looks up, and it's Dennis Quaid in old age makeup, and he says, "I'm still here, Chief."
Yeah, that is a moment I will tear up. I will unabashedly admit I had a hard time getting through this moment in the movie when I watched it today. I kind of forget. You actually do get future Dennis Quaid, that throughout the movie, little John has explained to his dad how you're going to die. You're going to die in a fire. You're going to die from lung cancer. And we're meant to understand they're never going to see each other. You will never see the two, father and son, physically touch each other or talk to each other. But it turns out, I guess Dennis Quaid listened to his advice and changed his lifestyle. And he's here all of a sudden, 1999. And John looks up. And it's the first time in the movie that father and son see each other and embrace. And the dad says, "I'm still here, little Chief." And damn, that is a tearjerker moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the only thing that could have topped it is if they screwed up the space-time continuum so much that instead of Dennis Quaid, it was Randy Quaid saying, "Hello, boys, I'm back."
They got the wrong Quaid. Shit, we got to do the whole movie over.
Don't mess with the time continuum, man.
Cousin Eddie, you bastard.
That's right. Jack Shephard, your shitter is full of pellets.
Now I gotta go. I'm an Amish bowler now. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of the movie. That we see father Dennis Quaid in old age makeup. He's like 70, 65, whatever now. We see 36-year-old John, and they hug and embrace, and it's the first time they have ever really known each other. And now they have all these shared memories and shared history, and all is right in the world. And that's really kind of the end of the movie. We just have a nice little scene at the end with it's like an epilogue of everyone in the movie on a baseball field playing softball together. You see John, he's like 36. You see old Dennis Quaid. You see the old mom. You see old Satch. You see Gordo, who's rich now, right? He has his Yahoo car.
Yeah, Frank hits a foul ball, and Gordo says, no, not the Mercedes. I believe it was Mercedes. Not the Mercedes. And the ball hits it's a terrible special effect, but goes straight into the headlight of the Mercedes, and it pans out, and you see the license plate, one Yahoo.
Yeah, nice little moment that he has helped out his old buddy Gordo, and really it's a nice little moment. There's some Garth Brooks song that plays after it, which I think got nominated for an Oscar perhaps. I kind of forget, but it didn't win. But yeah, it's a nice little scene, although with the plot twist that Dennis Quaid is now a serial killer, so that's the problem.
Well, Randy Quaid was a step away from it, so like brother, I guess.
Yeah, but again, just a really nice feel-good movie. Really, again, it's got some really tense adventure scenes. It's got some really nice intercut scenes where they're jumping back and forth between the past and the present at the same time. There's some great performances. I really love. It's weird. The scenes with Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel, they're never even in the same scene. They're just acting. It's them and talking to a radio, but it still works. It's really well done for what this movie actually is.
Yeah, it's when you asked me to do this, it was on your list. I was like, oh yeah, I knew that movie. I liked it. But unlike Johnny Dangerously or Swingers, it wasn't something that I had seen, 20, 30, 40 times. So I did have to go back and watch this, and I appreciated it because, again, I still have my dad and my mom, but, it managed to touch this little Grinch's heart.
Yeah, and I'm warning you again, someday, I'm not trying to be a downer, but we will all lose our parents one day, and this movie will hit you a little harder afterwards. I'm just telling you.
Absolutely. And I talked about that audio cassette of the 1980 Miracle on Ice. I know that moment will come at some point, hopefully not soon. Maybe I'll invest in a ham radio now, just in case.
Just in case that Aurora Borealis comes floating around again.
That's right, and I can talk to my dad about the 2016 Chicago Cubs dream season.
So you're changing your original plan from talking about the '69 season and finishing them off.
Yeah. Let's make sure my dad makes it way past 1969, and let's get him in the future.
All right, and one more thing I want to talk about this movie. This movie is really near and dear to my heart. It's one of those that hardly anybody ever talks about. So it's one of these rare ones. I kind of feel like it's my little movie. And when I heard there was a TV series made out of it, I'm like, no, that's my movie. Stop remaking stuff. But I will say, yeah, there's probably plot holes in this movie, and I don't care. Did the plot holes in this bother you, George?
No, absolutely not. Turn off your mind, enjoy a movie. You don't have. It's time travel. Okay, it doesn't exist, or if it does exist, 99.9% of the people listening to this podcast, you're not going to understand how it works. So shut up.
Yeah, and again, they say, a plot hole ruins a movie from being perfect, but I'd argue imperfect movies are just as fun as perfect movies. So that's why that stuff doesn't bother me. But admittedly, probably the science and the reality of some of the plot holes are not quite accurate. In fact, I was reading some of the comments on Roger Ebert's review, and that was basically it's very polarized. People who really care about the fact that this movie has gaping plot holes, and people who really don't. And I'm one who really doesn't.
Unless the plot hole is the size of a shotgun shell through the middle of your palm, I think you can ignore it.
Okay, and one last thing, just to end on a serious note here. Everyone loves baseball movies. Everyone loves Field of Dreams. Everyone loves father-son movies, and that's the one that they always talk about. Oh, the father-son baseball movie, the tear-jerker, the weepy movie. But I will flat out say I think this movie should be right up there with Field of Dreams when it comes to father-son baseball movies. And again, you may, not specifically you, George, but just anybody listening, you may have had to lose your father to really grasp that. But again, I would put this right up there with Field of Dreams. They are equally powerful to me, to be honest.
Well, again, I put it number 2 behind Like Father, Like Son because of Dudley Moore, but it's a close second.
All right, and once again, thank you for joining me. I know that's a very convoluted movie to talk about. I know you guys aren't going to hear it in the podcast, but George and I had lots of stops and starts where we start talking about a scene and then we stopped and redid it because it's too complex and it's 2 movies going on at once. So I hope you appreciate how polished the final version will sound because it really wasn't when we were doing it. We were trying our best.
And yes, I still don't know that I've got 100% of the baseball right, but you said that I hate the Mets, and well, Mets fans are going to hate me because I'm sure I screwed up some of their prized World Series facts.
Yeah, and just one last correction: Buster Keaton was not the third baseman for the '69 Mets. George was incorrect about that.
But Buster Bluth was.
All right. Once again, I am Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter @Mario J. Lanza. Until next time, I'll be out there searching for more hidden little gems like Frequency that just need a little more love in the world. And I'll try to find somebody interesting to come on and talk about them. Until next time, give a hug to your dad. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Spirit and guts!
I'm still here, Chief.
During the day, you could shoot a band with China.